Alright, I've been waiting for this one, and it finally went back into print, so now I have one, and now it's time to review it. MMC Tarn. I'm super excited for this. It means I get to talk about Tarn and the DJD. Now, I'm not under some fool impression that most of you don't already know who this is, but for the few of you who might not, I'm going to be a bit more lore and trivia heavy than I normally am. Honestly, this video is mostly just an excuse for me to talk about my interpretation of Tarn. So, if you don't read the comics or the wikis, you might not know who Tarn is, because this dude is not about to show up in anything other than maybe a Bayformers movie, because that's already full of terrifying psychopaths.
Give me your faith.
Tarn is the leader of the Decepticon Gestapo, the secret police, the DJD. Basically, a unit of slasher villains who go around brutally slaughtering any Decepticon who ever betrayed them, had second thoughts about the cause, didn't work hard enough, or just showed mercy to a defeated Autobot. And by brutally slaughter, I mean torture them until they kill them by cutting out their brains and feeding it to them like they're goddamn Hannibal Lecter. Yeah, you aren't going to see these guys in any media even remotely accessible to kids. They're more fucked up than Rampage from Beast Wars was, and that guy was an immortal cannibal. Anyways, Tarn is the boss of that group. Tarn presents himself with an air of culture and eloquent sophistication. The man can talk you to death. Literally. He can literally talk you to death. That's not a metaphor. That's not a hyperbole. He has the superpower to literally talk you to death. If you listen to him talk for too long, you just die. One of my favorite moments of his in the comic actually comes long after he's dead, when it turns out he left a lethal voicemail for someone, and it still works. I've never seen a superpower that works after the user is dead. Anyways, since he's such a verbose and gregarious character, he needs to have a voice that lends itself to being listened to. His creator has said that if he were to cast a voice for Tarn, he'd pick Keith David. That's a strong pick.
What Empire City needs is more cops. And a Hooters.
That was a wrong clip.
I've been denied everything, even my
Hooters.
As much as I love Keith David and always want to see him get more roles, I can't agree with that. Because whenever I read his dialogue, all I can hear in my head is Phantom Limb.
What are you doing? I'm wringing my hands. Menacingly.
I mean, there's no such thing as Keith David having enough work, but I am confident that the best version of this character is one that sounds like the best villain ever to have a forced amputation, and you can fight me on that, Vader fans. As for the figure, he's definitely an interesting one. I'm not quite sure what scale he's kind of sitting at. He's like a head shorter than the old leader class used to be, but he feels even smaller than that would suggest. His look is pretty accurate to the comics, but he's got a few key discrepancies. For starters, he's just not swole enough. I'd say he's somewhere around 20% slimmer than he's supposed to be, and he's got a lot of surface details that just aren't quite right. But I'd say this figure's greatest sin in the looks department are the hands. These are clearly something they just had lying around for use on other figures, because Tarn famously has claw-like hands. These really do bring down the look of the figure in a noticeable way. His ab lines are also a bit off, and his chest crest is just subtly off. Though to be fair, his ab lines are never consistent. Anyways, once again, we have insanely long legs on this figure, but that does kind of fit the actual character design this time. I think the real thing throwing off the look is that the thighs are way too skinny. His crotch is also weirdly oversized. It looks like Tarn raided the entire sock drawer because he felt like he had something to prove. Now you may wonder, who's the man under the mask? And there he is. Much less dramatic than you'd think. Also, I guess technically wrong. The alternate head that comes with the MMC Tyrant Ron is, I guess, the technically correct one. I've always hated the twist that it turned out that Tarn was Glitch. It makes no sense. For starters, we see repeatedly that he has two eyes, plus it seems like he has a normal face under there, and I was under the impression that you can't cure an Ampurata. Otherwise, why would so many people choose to live with it? But it also doesn't make sense because Glitch couldn't kill people with his voice, and Tarn can't shut off technology by touching it, so neither one has the other's superpower. I get the feeling that the fandom figured out who Tarn was supposed to be under the mask, and rather than just let them be correct, the writers needed to have their twist, so they did a last-minute change, making him a character who wasn't being used by the comic anymore. Anyways, it doesn't make sense and I hate it, so I'm good with it being a more normal, though still clearly incorrect face, because he doesn't have his famous left eye scar. Also, I think the helmet crowds his mug. Posability on this figure is quite high. He's got a small amount of forward and backwards butterfly, and normally that'd be a big plus here, but it's not quite enough to do anything all too meaningful. It does let some postures have a little more presence, but it's only going to make some look better. It won't give you any new poses you couldn't get some version of before. It's kind of awkward to get the full range out of his shoulders in order to have him in a proper fusion cannon pose. A lot of what you do is going to leave it pointed down slightly. You can do it, but it takes some finagling. He's got an ab crunch, and that's cool, but make sure he's not backlit when you use it because you can see clear through him if you do. Because of this ab joint, you can get him to do that anime robot crotch thrust that I don't get at all, and I think looks dumb as fuck. Seriously, why would a robot bust its spine to shove its junk at someone? Is there any advantage this conveys other than a bad aesthetic? Huh, maybe this is the reason why the designers decided to give him such a BDE with the sock drawer. His legs are unfortunately limited by the sculpt. You can't really get him kicking forward all that far because the geometry will either stop it or force you to move the leg off to the side almost immediately. Knees deeper than you could ever need, though you do need to slightly untransform them to get the full range, and the mother of all clodhoppers. His feet are gigantic, and you'd think they'd give him a bit more stability than they actually do. I mean, they can do a fantastic job, but I find they're just a little less stable than their size would suggest. The range on his head is way beyond normal. This might have the most posable dome of any figure I own. The one real issue with the posing is the fusion cannon. It's just slightly too big. The corners of his shoulder plates and the back of the cannon catch on each other, and they prevent you from really doing any movement of the arm the cannon is tabbed into. I'd rate this probably somewhere around a 9 to a 9.5. It's got all the mandatory joints, it's got joints most other figures don't have, and it's got some special mobility joints that allow for some subtle posture shifts. Really, some full-on forward and backward butterfly, some better articulated hands, a little more clearance on the legs, and a fusion cannon that didn't block movement, and this would be at a 10. Transformation is fun and simple. I mean, perhaps it might be a little too simple. The arms could really stand to do a tiny bit more than just lay along the sides, but that's not much of a problem. Its one real issue is, of course, the parts forming cannon. But it's not that big a deal because it basically becomes exactly as cohesive with or without the cannon. And that's to say, not cohesive at all. This is basically a gigantic pile of nothing. I mean, it's exactly Tarn's alt mode. Tarn's ugly, stupid alt mode. We got 2 out of 3 so far, so we're not doing terrible, but damn, this thing isn't doing great in the looks department. It's also not doing great on the anything else department. This does not roll because it flat out does not have anything to roll on. I wouldn't even choose to leave this in this mode on a shelf because it's not resting on any kind of tire or roller or caster of any sort. It would just be sitting on the plastic, and walking by it would cause it to vibrate and scuff anywhere it's in contact with the shelf. It doesn't even have a rotating turret, and that's entirely the fault of the peg for the fusion cannon just not being long enough. Sure, the machine guns have some swivel, but that's a joint needed for the transformation. He does have tiny missiles in his toes, though. I don't quite know what the point of these is. They're kind of impossible to take out or put back without tweezers, and it's not something the character was ever shown to have. Plus, he's got some non-removable ones hidden right next to those. I mean, I guess it's extra bang for your buck, but it's kind of pointless. I don't think anyone will buy this for this feature, and I don't think anyone buying this for any other reason will find any use in this gimmick. Anyways, all those gripes aside, this is a pretty damn good figure. In robot mode, this thing looks kick-ass. It poses fantastically, one of the better figures in my entire collection in that regard. It's got a fun transformation, and despite its bullshitty alt mode, this is a figure of one of the most interesting villains that doesn't really have much of a shot at being translated into any other media. And I think the point that I'm missing entirely right now is that if you want a Tarn, this is your only option. And it's not a bad one. Like, for the only choice, it hits basically everything 90%. Its appearance is just barely off. Its posability is just barely not perfect. Its transformation is just barely too simple. And the alt mode is correct but not inspiring. I don't know that you can really expect better for a figure of any character. This is probably the best, only choice anyone has ever had to make. If you want a Tarn, there is one fantastic Tarn. And that's not half of what I have to say, but it's enough of what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please, share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.